Let's jump into the A-League debrief for what is this, round 12 of the A-League men's competition. And the question that I want to hit the both of you with right off the top of the show, we've talked about this league being competitive and, obviously it has these mechanics that allow it to be competitively balanced. And this year, more than most, we've seen the table completely compacted. Jacob, we watched Adelaide United earlier today. They're only, they drop a disappointing match and they fall to, what is it, 7th or 8th in the table, I think? 8th at the moment.
8th, yeah.
But one more win could take them to 3rd, right? So one win has the potential to do so much good or bad for a particular team. However, there are two teams right at the pointy end, Auckland FC and Sydney FC, both with convincing wins this weekend, Christian, that are starting to open up just a little bit of a gap in terms of the title race. You have Auckland on 24 points, Sydney with a game in hand on Auckland on 22 points, so relatively similar tallies here. And then the next best is Macarthur on 19 points, but they have 13 games played. So they have 2 games played more than Sydney and still a 3-point gap, and then 1 more game played than Auckland with a 5-point gap. So this kind of mid-pack into the spots just outside the table before you get to the Wanderers and the Mariners, that is all very tight. But when we're talking about the teams capable of winning the Premier's play, as we're pretty much hitting the half-point way in the season now, is it a 2-horse race?
I think it's safe to say so. I think you look at Sydney have a game in hand, just say hypothetically if they win that game, 25 points, Auckland 24, and then the next best in 3rd is Macarthur 19, below them the Jets with a game in hand on 18, and from there, from that 3rd position to about, maybe 7th to 8th, you can say that all those teams in and around between can all drop points so easily, whereas you look at Sydney and Auckland, you just don't see them dropping too many points, especially to the smaller sides. They're just so efficient and so consistent. It's like, where do you see the drop off? There has to be a significant something extraordinary has to happen in terms of injuries or something along those lines for them to drop off really bad, for it to be more than a 2-horse race, or for someone else to get back into the title race besides those 2 clubs, because otherwise I just don't see it. So for the meantime, it's definitely out of Auckland and Sydney. If I had to choose one to win the Premier's plate from here, I'd still lean towards Sydney, just from what I've sort of seen, right throughout round 1. I just think they have more of a ceiling to reach to, whereas Auckland, we know we've touched on, last season they set such high standards. Perhaps they haven't really reached those high standards as of yet, although they have been still winning games, albeit some of them haven't been as convincing as they were last season. But I just think Sydney have an extra gear to them that they can still go to. And again, with that game in hand, they've still got that bit of a buffer if they do win that. But yeah, it's super close. It's definitely out of Auckland and Sydney at this stage.
And look, Jacob, obviously it's 5 points, 6 points, whatever. This is tight. There's still 13, 14 games to go. If you lose 6 or 7 games in a row, teams are going to catch you. But when we're looking at the different options of teams that could come up and supplant these two in these top spots, you're looking at Macarthur, Newcastle, Brisbane, and City. That's the rest of the top 4 at the moment, which, if you weren't paying too much close attention to the results, I think would surprise a lot of people, because these teams, like every other team pretty much, apart from maybe Auckland, I think Sydney have experienced this as well, have had big moments of inconsistency coming up and down. And obviously the Jets are on a good run. The Raw are going the other way. Maybe they can stabilise and come together. Bulls have Asia to deal with a little bit later on when we get back into February as well. So there's so many variables there. And then you just look at Auckland and Sydney and you see how settled they are and the quality of their wins on the weekend. Auckland, 2-0 for them. And then Sydney got a 3-0 win over Macarthur. It's just comprehensive.
Yeah. And it kind of feels like it's really going to be a battle between those two this season, whereas last season we did see a couple of different teams try and challenge Auckland unsuccessfully, albeit, but, Adelaide, Western United at one point, Melbourne City, I think we're up there too at a different point in the season, trying to challenge them for first place. It just feels like they are starting to build that gap towards the teams below them. But when you watch them play, both Sydney and Auckland, that's not massively surprising. They do look the 2 best teams in the competition by far. And I do agree with the sentiment that Sydney perhaps have the higher ceiling, but I will say I do like kind of the evolution that we've seen a little bit of Auckland in the last couple of games. It's been a little bit more fluid. Their attacks have just felt better. Like the vibes of them have been better. I don't know that's the best way to describe it, but it just feels like they're starting to really click now and go through the gears a lot easier in games. And okay, there's still moments of scrappiness. I mean, the Sam Cosgrove goal, I think he claimed it. I don't know if it's gone down officially as his or if it was an own goal or what. But you know, that was a little bit scrappy, and that's kind of your classic Auckland. But then you get Lachie Brook up the other end, who's able to just work his magic, cut it back on his left. And a fantastic hit, and he's coming really good this season as well. I mean, he showed the goods at the Wanderers, and I think has just taken it up a notch here with Auckland, which is huge for them. And you know, kind of him finding his groove has helped them in attack as well, and find that fluidity and find that confidence going forward. So you know, don't write Auckland off. You know, they are, I think, you know, the most clinical team in the league. I mean, statistically, the Mariners technically are the most clinical. They have, you know, like the lowest, you know, number of shots and, you know, things like that, but the highest goal conversion rate in the league, which is a mind-boggling stat. But I mean, in terms of, yeah, overall efficiency on the pitch, Auckland are definitely the top team in the league this season. So look, it's going to be an all-out brawl, I think, between these two teams moving forwards. And I don't know, maybe the points gap as it is already is, you know, going to be, you know, just enough to keep it that way, right? You know, 2 points is... that means that Auckland have to drop, Sydney have to win the game, and you know, if it's only a draw, then you know, Auckland can potentially stay ahead of them, and it's all these different things. So I don't know, maybe Auckland have already done enough to kind of keep Sydney at bay, but I guess we're just going to see as the league unfolds, and like you said, Lachie, we're kind of only just about halfway through the season now, so there's still plenty of football to be played and plenty of mistakes to be made as well by both of these teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But yeah, it kind of feels a little bit different to last season where we did have a few different title challenges. It feels like this year it is going to come down between one of these two teams, between Auckland and Sydney FC, and at this stage it's really difficult to pin them. I guess it just kind of comes down to who you think is better at this point in time. And for me, I'm still going to say Auckland just because they have been clinical, but I can understand why people are saying Sydney, because when they are on, they are absolutely electric.
Yeah, so let me split the difference there. I'm going to lean Sydney, and I did this at the start of the year as well, but I think when I look at these two games in particular, Auckland, I completely agree with you, Jacob. They look fluid. Like, you know, Cosgrove's goal is a bit scrappy, obviously, and I did just check. At least Flash Score has it as his goal. So well done, Sam. Lachie Brooks is obviously just a piece of individual brilliance, but they had 3 or 4 passing moves in that second half that weren't rewarded with goals, that were just so silky. They were just cutting Brisbane apart at moments. And when I look at Sydney FC and their win, you know, for the Kiss Bay goal, you have Patrick Wood, who had one of his best ever games in Sky Blue. Yeah, you know, he drops deep. He finds a really perfect ball out to Ryan Grant, who individually just, you know, looks up, gets his head up, picks the right moment, plays a really straight and flat ball into Piero Kispe, who's able to trap it and then shoot. And then, you know, Ben Garuccio on the free kick on a dime for Campazano with the brilliant flick header. Like, they are moments of really individual brilliance. And if Ufuk Talay, maybe when he gets his suit back on when it's not 40 degrees, which I thought was another funny moment of this round. You know, if he can get them just looking a bit better as a team, and obviously, you know, having those individual players, having that depth of quality, Christian, is going to allow you to just win games like this sometimes. But we saw against Melbourne City what happens when that doesn't happen. And so if they can get the team working, I completely agree with you that Sydney FC have the highest ceiling compared to Auckland, but it's just a matter of, does that happen before the season's up?
I'll play devil's advocate as to why Sydney can't win the Premier's Plate. Can they win scrappy like Auckland can, like they've shown this season? I think that's probably my one doubt with this Sydney team. Like, you know, when it's all going perfect against MacArthur, for instance, this weekend, it's like, you know, when it's clicking, they're basically unstoppable, or almost thereabouts. But when things aren't sort of going their way, you look back to that result when they lost against Newcastle. I think it was 2-0 the scoreline. It's like, when things don't go their way in that match, it's sort of like the heads drop a bit. It's like sort of pointing fingers a bit. It's a bit all over the shop. And that's sort of where I worry with this Sydney side. Do they have the leadership in that group to be able to combat that and, you know, be able to overcome that adversity? Whereas Auckland, The answer is yes. I mean, we've seen it already over a large sample size this season where we've said time and time again, although they're not playing the best football at times, they're still getting results. And at the end of the day, that's what counts, right? If you want to win championships, it doesn't matter about how well you play. It's about how many 3 points you can pick up, and that all adds up, right? And then, again, in terms of ceiling, what I mentioned for Sydney, Auckland still have quite a high ceiling themselves to reach, right? So who knows if they start getting their act together a bit in terms of, the free-flowing football, on the counter-attack, that they can be just as dangerous and just as a threat as Sydney are to winning the Premier's Plate. So I think that's the one question I'd pose to Sydney. If they can answer that, then I think the title is theirs to lose.
I think it's a very good point. The other factor in Sydney's season that we're going to come into play as quick as next weekend is that they've now finished all their games at Leichhardt Oval. Sydney Football Stadium, at least to my understanding, is finally ready for use again. At least that was the plan, to definitely play next week game against Wellington at Sydney Football Stadium. Hopefully that does happen. We know these things, the timetables can change quite rapidly, but hopefully that is the case. They get back in home. We'll have a derby. Not a big blue, right? Because we've already had... Oh, we get 3 big blues this year, don't we? Because
Correct.
of Western United dropping out.
The next one's in Melbourne, I think.
Yeah.
But
on
I
Australia Day.
Don't know about the other one. Yeah, 7th of March at home for Sydney.
Okay, so there you go. So we're going to have a couple more big fixtures at Sydney Football Stadium, so that'll play into it as well. I want to go to Saturday afternoon, Christian. 2 of the biggest teams in the competition, Melbourne Victory and Western Sydney Wanderers, played out a 1-0 game. There was a penalty early on for a handball that I've felt very conflicted about for the last 24 hours.
I love that we had that conversation as well, Lachie, on the last pod about what's a handball, what's not a handball, and then that happens, and it's just we still don't know. We still don't know.
Like I feel the ones that Brisbane were denied midweek were both way more penalty shouts than the one that hit Santos, because he's close, he's in a natural position, he's trying to get balance, to stick his foot in. He's turning away, the ball is going in straight into Rosette and probably 20 degrees wide of the goal. Look, to be honest, I don't think it's a penalty. I would have given 2, as I said, midweek before I'd given that one. But that's what decided it, Christian, and it set a pattern of play for the remainder of the game where the Wanderers just dug in, played the ball long, often not to a target of their own, and Staj even described it as, I think, their worst performance of the season post-match. And we've had questions about both of these clubs for long spells this year, and I feel like this game exposed both of them really badly. I'm not sure who comes off better or worse, to be honest. The Wanderers really didn't create much going forward. The only chance was off Bojidai Krayev after, Seb Esposito dives in, which I think is the one flaw that we've kind of seen recurring from him, from what's been a decent start in the A-League. And for Melbourne Victory, it's if Nikos Virgos isn't on form and he's not getting enough service, who's going to score the goals from them? Apart from a couple of brief flurries from Nishan Velupale and some desperation late on, I can't really see where they're going to come from.
I'll touch on the penalty first. For me, it's not a penalty. To be that close proximity between the shot and when the ball hits the hand, Santos is turning his body around to try and block the ball. He can't see it. He's put his arms behind his back. For me, it's not intentional. So again, it's such a grey area within the handball rules where you've got to make it as, if it hits the hand, it's a straight penalty. No ifs or buts. But we've got this grey area where, is it in a natural position? Well, I think it was in a natural position, his hand. So, and it was very close proximity, like I said before. So I just don't understand how you can possibly give that as a penalty. I thought Wanderers were very fortunate to be given the decision. And obviously Barbarouses just tucks it away, former Victory player. And then from there, you knew what the Wanderers were going to do, right? You saw so many white shirts sit behind the ball, defend, especially in that second half. You said it, Lachie, they created barely anything at all, just that one chance to Krayev, which he really should have put away to really seal it. But I thought Victory were toothless, I guess. And Mata, I wouldn't say he was poor, but it wasn't one of his best performances in terms of, being able to create the play. There were a lot of long balls from him, which missed the target. A lot of looping through balls, which, Virgos just couldn't get onto the end of. So I think for Victory, when that isn't clicking in the final third, it's like, where do the goals come from, right? And it's not just Virgos, it's Mata, it's Santos, it's all these players in and around Valupale. If they're all not contributing, if they're all having an off day, it's very difficult for Victory because they don't have that one player who can just take the game from the scruff of the neck. Like Virgos, for instance, he needs service. If he's not getting service, then he's not going to be able to do stuff on his own, right? So I think it's the whole collective. If that's not working and clicking together, then I think Victory are in a bit of trouble. So, you saw a lot of backwards passes from midfield to defence, in that second half, trying to break open the Wanderers' defence, but that low block was really, really solid, and Stajic knew that the halftime team talk would have been just that. Keep it tight, back four, back five, just really be solidified, and they should come away with a clean sheet, and that's exactly what they did. You had that one chance on Mata from a corner, I think 55th minute, 60th minute, where probably very fortunate to not go in, a goal line clearance. Then other than that, a few chances here and there maybe, but I thought it was pretty comfortable, to be quite honest, for the Wanderers' point of view. It just so happened to be that they didn't want to attack as much, right? They didn't want to expose themselves. Yes, that sort of ran the risk for them to be exposed to the back because they were sitting way deep. 10, 15 minutes to go, even 5 minutes to go, there was a chance that Victory, if they had that better service, then the equaliser was bound to happen, but that just didn't eventuate. So I think you have to give Wanderers plaudits, and they'll be very happy away from home to take the 3 points, considering the season they've had, right? Being bottom of the table for most of the season, they just need some confidence. They need some momentum one way or another, and Stadge doesn't care how that comes about. He just wants the 3 points and to walk away from Melbourne with that. So nothing really happened in this game, let's be honest. Very, I guess, boring, which you don't want to say, but you've got to state reality, and that's exactly what this game was.
And I think, Jacob, it wasn't much gained for either of these teams, apart from 3 points for the Wanderers. But to their credit, and the asterisk on this is, as much as you want to criticise how defensive they were, and Stage made a bunch of defensive substitutions, like bringing midfielders on for defenders as well. For attackers. The fact is, they got an early penalty and they had a 1-0 lead, so they didn't have to go and score another goal. So to Christian's point, like to just get 3 points, get a little bit of momentum, that was the job that they needed to do.
Yeah. And look, okay, it was boring, but the Wanderers will take a boring 3 points right now. They'll be very happy with that. And just, didn't really put too much of a foot wrong, which for the season they've had is a very good sign. I know that, like you said, Lachie Stadge said that he thought it was perhaps one of their worst performances of the season. I think that might be a little bit harsh. Okay, they weren't perhaps as successful going forwards, but they didn't really give themselves the opportunity to do that, number one. And number two, I don't think that the game state as it was necessarily called for it. I thought that the way that they defended just completely killed anything that the Victory were trying to create. And I've seen a lot of criticism of Nikos Virgos and his inability to put the ball in the back of the net in this game, but it felt like he really didn't have any clear-cut chances. I think he had maybe one that was like a ball back across the box that he hit and just kind of mishit slightly, and it rolled towards Lawrence Thomas. But then there were two more chances that game that he really had, and they were more him actually creating that opportunity for himself than anything else. Was one ball comes into the box a bit congested, he takes a touch and on the swivel tries to hit the volley and it hits the side netting. And then there was a header later on in the game as well where he comes flying from about 15 yards away to get to the ball and even get the header off in the first place. So it just felt like they couldn't do anything against the Wanderers. And okay, yes, that came at the sacrifice for the Wanderers of the kind of attacking football that they've tried to play this season. But if that's going to get them results, maybe they need to reevaluate that perspective that they've had on the game so far and go, maybe we do just need to be a little bit more pragmatic defensively and kind of just hold out for these kind of results. We were talking earlier, or Christian was talking earlier about, those scrappy wins. This is a perfect example of that, right? And how it can, perhaps change the season. I'd be surprised. I think that there's still some problems with the Wanderers. I think that, they're still just it just feels like they're missing links across the park, right? Between defense and midfield, between midfield and attack, it just feels like it's a little bit disjointed still. But a win's a win. It's a scrappy, boring win from a neutral perspective, but that's 3 valuable points for the Wanderers. So they can complain about perhaps the way that they played and the way that it looked, but on paper the result was there. So they'll be pretty pleased with that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Christian, 2 teams that have been storming through in their start to 2026, and I'm sure really will be wanting to make a decent impression in the final series as well, the Newcastle Jets and Perth Glory. Perth is starting, it feels like, to really, really click. You got Adam Taggart back fit, starting alongside Tom Lawrence. They appear to just be a proper nuisance duo, which I think is really exciting. They have had to deal with a lot of injuries, Perth, but they had a comprehensive win against the Central Coast Mariners. And then Newcastle look like a really evolved team. And I think when we can compare them to Wellington in the same way we did earlier in the season, it feels like from that initial state, and we know that Wellington had a good comeback against Adelaide as well, but the Jets really feel like they've evolved as a team. That it's not just recapturing the form that they had at the Australia Cup, but they didn't look like coughing the ball up in dangerous areas. They still had that flow of attack. Eli Adams, that little outside of the boot pass to send through. I forget who was the striker that ended up not scoring, but they had those flashy moments going forward, but they looked solid defensively. And then, Lachie Rose capitalises on an error from Germain Ferreira, tucks it away, becomes a leader in the Golden Boot, and off the Jets go. 4 wins away from home for the first time in franchise history in the A-League. That's, literally unheard of for the Newcastle Jets. And it's built off, I think, a new defensive stability that we haven't seen. And for Perth, the Adam Griffiths train just keeps rolling on. They keep just gaining momentum, gaining form, and this was a really strong win for them as well.
For sure. And usually when a new manager comes in, Griffiths, especially because he came in mid-season, right, when Perth Glory, there was a bit of uncertainty around it. You have to start from the back, right? I mean, it's this old cliche, but really to get results straight away, to get your side on board, that's how you've got to start, right? Build from the back, and then from there, you can work your way forward and then try and, draw up plans in terms of, final third and, creativity, this and that. But the defensive back four, whatever formation you play, it's got to be rock solid. And for those 2 clubs in particular, Perth and Newcastle, it's been really, really impressive, especially the last few weeks. I mean, from a Newcastle point of view, I had the discussion with Pauletti a couple of weeks back on the pod when it was just us 2, and I was saying to them that with the Jets, they weren't really showing the same form and consistency in terms of from the back line compared from the Australia Cup, what we saw from them, right? You saw maybe the first few games of the season where you saw that identity with the Jets, but after that, it was sort of on, off, a good win against Sydney, but dropping points against teams they shouldn't have. And, especially that 5-4 result against MacArthur, you thought, okay, what on earth are you supposed to expect from the Jets, right? I mean, a lot of lapses in concentration, a lot of defensive mistakes that should not be happening under a Mark Milligan side. But it seems now, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because who knows, in the next couple of weeks, we could see Jets conceding 5 goals again to, I don't know, the Mariners. It's like, it's back to square one. But I think the Jets at their best can definitely compete for a top 6 berth. I think this squad's well equipped. It's good enough. Clayton Taylor, Eli Adams, Lachie Rose, these are quality players that can make the difference, right? At any given moment against any given team. So I think the way they controlled the game, not in terms of possession against City, but the way they were able to just pick their moments. I thought that was really impressive. And they were able to obviously get that 1-0 result and off they go. 3 points back to Newcastle. That's exactly what they're after. The same as the Wanderers the day before against Victory. So, both Newcastle and Perth looking really, really good. It's just, do they have the depth? Could a couple of injuries maybe derail their season that's had? And we'll see those ebbs and flows in terms of results. Time will tell. But for the meantime, considering where both these clubs were last season, it's a massive improvement, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And, the Jets' last 5 is 4 wins, which can only be matched by Melbourne Victory at the moment. Yeah. So considering that Melbourne Victory lost their recent game, you have to consider the Jets the form team at the moment. And Jacob, that one blemish was that 5-4 against the Bulls. And I wonder, the narrative around them from the start of the season up to that point would be, sure, you can score 2 or 3, but we'll score more. And I wonder if that was just a reset point. It's like, okay, this is just a little bit ridiculous now. We've scored 4 goals and we've lost a game. Let's seriously knuckle down just for a couple of weeks. Let's, give this the priority focus it deserves, and then look at results.
Yeah, I think potentially that's the case. I think also is potentially they just, mark one up to the, crazy, insane game, one a year column,
Sure.
right? And they go, that's ours, out the way and done. It's going to happen to everyone eventually in this league. So, they got theirs out of the way, and look at, it wasn't a great result for them, but yeah, they kind of could reset and go again. But yeah, I just think that the Jets is still just one of those teams that the gap between their best and their worst is enormous, and I think it's about slowly bridging that gap. And with a young team, I think it was said on commentary today, their average squad age is at least 2 years younger than just about anyone else in the league. So they're really working with some very, very young players. Obviously Milligan's had a bit of experience with that in the Adelaide United setup, but still that's a massive gap, 2 years difference between you and like the next youngest team. So there's a lot of inexperience there. So I think that they've also maybe perhaps got to recontextualize what they're doing too, of okay, maybe it's not, it's great to have gotten that cup win, sure, but success isn't guaranteed here in this kind of first season with a new head coach with a very, very young team. It's right, let's lay the groundwork and play some good football. Let's make our mistakes as well and learn from those so that we can continue to be good moving forward. So now obviously that's difficult in the A-League. We've spoken about it, in terms of player retention and things like that, but we're slowly seeing a change in that kind of philosophy of giving younger players longer contracts, giving them a little bit more chance to actually prove their worth and kind of stay with a club for an extended period of time, because it is beneficial for the player, it's beneficial for the club, basically everybody involved, except for the player agents who aren't getting their cut of a transfer fee a little bit earlier. Everyone's
bring up player agents this week. It's been a bit of a storm, hasn't it?
That was an ill-advised move from me, but no, it just feels like perhaps they've also recontextualized where they're at, and they're going, maybe we're actually kind of overachieving a little bit here, and we don't need to get carried away with it, right? We can continue to just be ourselves, learn from our mistakes, like I said, and start to bridge that gap between where our worst football is and where our best football is. And I think that's what they've done recently, is slowly start to iron out a few mistakes. I mean, the goal they scored against City, I remarked in the chat, was kind of how they've been conceding goals this season, which I found quite a funny little comparison. They're able to capitalize on those kind of mistakes from other teams. So it feels like they're slowly starting to get into a bit more of a rhythm now than the kind of stop-start early season that they had, which I don't think it was helped by that first round fixture against the Mariners just being another one of those crazy games. So experience in the legs for these younger players is going to help them too. Milligan getting more experience as a head coach is going to help. It's all going to slowly get better for the Jets, and that's a really promising sign, considering how pretty well they're doing this season, like you said, Christian, compared to where they were at last season, and even coming into the season, okay, off the back of a cup win, but there were still quite a few doubters. I think that they can be extremely proud of where they're at the moment, and they're in a really good position now to keep pushing this season and also next season and the season after that with the young squad that they have to actually really be a dangerous side in this competition.
All right. And Jacob, I want to go back to you just to finish off all of our games here. But Wellington Adelaide on Sunday afternoon, can you explain to me what the feeling must be for Adelaide fans at the moment? Like, you've gone through a rough patch where your defence has fallen apart. Bart Vriends, who has signed on for another year, and I think a club option for a further 12 months as well. But obviously he's out injured at the moment. You have a lot of players away. Adelaide have a lot of players at the under 23s, which we'll get to a little later in the episode. Panakikianis, as it turns out, could have potentially been in that squad, but the coaching staff around that team decided that taking any more than 3 players away from an A-League club might be a bit of an unfair thing to do. So we understand, is kind of in that group that kind of just got left alone for the sake of the club, and he's really the only central defender left. We saw the 2 more inexperienced kids get a run last week and really struggle. This time it was Kikianis back to fitness and Jay Barnett, who's come in and you know, there's still a lot of talent on that field, and you go 2-0 up away from home in Wellington. You think this is just a great little 3 points to get while we are so down on players, while our playing staff are struggling. And then Wellington just come out of nowhere and really attack that second half and get the 2 goals. Could have even won it late on, if not for, I think it was a really tight offside call, right? So, look, it just must be a pretty brutal blow for what's been a tough period already for the Reds.
Yeah, I'd say that the prevailing feeling is frustration, I think, among the Adelaide fan base. It's been just so rough to see. It feels like a lot again of the same issues that have been the case for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 almost years for Adelaide now, of just, you know, where the weak areas on the pitch are, and it's just persistently unaddressed. And okay, yes, Bart Vriend signs on, and you know, I think he's been a lot better this season than he was last season. He's kind of taken a step up, made fewer mistakes, looked a bit more of a leader at the back. But now he's out injured, so you know, that's kind of a bit of a blow. I think fans are happy that he's going to be back at least next season, especially with rumours potentially of Panikakianis heading overseas in this January window, which would be a further blow to the club. That would honestly kill the season, I think, for Adelaide. I think they'd have to go, right, we've just got to get to the end of the season and start from scratch next season. I genuinely reckon that would kill Adelaide's chances of making finals. But yeah, it's frustration, because it's not like Adelaide are playing bad football. Okay, last weekend against the Mariners was bad football from Adelaide, I'll admit that, and the second half in this game against Wellington was bad football. But in that first half, that first goal especially, was such a brilliantly constructed move. It was perfect. They capitalised on the mistake that we know Wellington are going to make by getting too high too early. They get the runner in behind Panache Medania, a quick early ball across. You know, it's just, everything was working smoothly. They looked good. They looked fantastic, I thought, in that first half. Wellington couldn't create much. Adelaide had all the ball, were creating all the chances, and then the second half comes out, and it's like it's completely switched. And you know, perhaps the wind played a little bit into that. It was quite blowy there in Wellington today, so that could have played into it a bit. But it just looked like Adelaide came out in the second half completely disinterested in holding on to that win, and were happy to take a draw. And I think it's that kind of attitude which has seeped in over the last few weeks that has fans really frustrated. Craig Goodwin hasn't been himself this season, for whatever reason. He just has not been able to have that impact. You know, yes, okay, he's been playing out of position, but he's also just not been putting in the same, at least visible amount of effort on the pitch. It feels like sometimes he gets a little bit lazy. The two big, foreign signings in Anselmo and Juan Muniz have been kind of just okay for the most part. Anselmo in this one I thought was okay, and then he kind of went down hurt again, so that seemed to just be a nothingy knock. But he's 36 years old, so there's always the risk of it just keeps piling on, and then he's out injured again. So it just there's a lot of frustration. And last week it culminated in there was a little bit of a tantrum. I don't know if anybody caught it if it was caught on TV or not, but Ryan Kitto, when Craig Goodwin was taken off, Goodwin gave Kitto the armband for the last 30 minutes or whatever it was of the game, and Kitto was like, "No, I don't want this." And then went and I gave it to Jay Barnett or someone. And so it just feels like the attitude at the moment of the club stinks, and I think that really hurts the fans, because for all the bad performances in the past, at least the playing group has kind of been united. And we saw that at the end of last season with everything that was going on in the media about the players actually came together and was strong and united behind Cole Viet for the games that he had left at the club. And there was at least what seemed like a team atmosphere. It seems completely disjointed this season, and that's a shame, because there are some great players coming through. Ryan White got on the score sheet again. He's been tremendous. Johnny Yoles had a very, very good season, and obviously the three boys that have gone over with the Ollie Roos have had tremendous seasons as well. So there is a lot of reason to be positive, but the performances just aren't there. And it's things like poor substitutions, poor game planning, poor second halves, and it kind of felt like the writing on the wall. Writing was on the wall for this one as well, when the broadcast put up a stat that Adelaide have yet to lose a game this season where they've scored first, and I think everyone went, "Oh well, okay, this is going to be the one that bucks that trend," and it happened to be the case. But yeah, I think it's going to be this next game now, a home game against Melbourne Victory. That is very much a make or break for how fans are going to feel about this season. Already lost one original rivalry game this season. You can't afford to lose the one that you get at home, and especially with the run of form that they've been on recently, it just feels like this could be, the last big opportunity for Adelaide to actually stamp down and prove their credentials this season. Otherwise, it might fall apart. So yeah, there's definitely frustration, I think, around the fan base at the moment. The club basically saying that they're not really looking to sign anybody this January. And the interesting wording from Andrioli was that Ajak Riak, who the new striker that Adelaide have signed, was signed because he made himself available. Which, what, did he approach the club? Like, what does that mean? What do you mean he made himself available? Just interesting wording. So yeah, it feels like it's a case of they've got to make do with the squad that they've got, and so far that squad's not performing, and fans are a bit worried about it. But I guess we'll see. Like I said, Kikianis, if he can stick around, there's still a little bit of hope. There's still a glimmer there. But yeah, it's definitely on tenterhooks, I think, in the City of Churches at the moment.